What is the importance of having primary education?
Yeah, primary education, obviously it's the foundation of learning. Children learn a huge amount in that primary phase, especially 3 to 7 year olds. It's looked at the fact that they learn more between 0 to 7 years old than they do for the rest of their lives. So that early primary education is extremely important, that early years. And then it's the building blocks to secondary education as well. So going in Wales, we have what was foundation learning, sort of early years learning, into sort of Key Stage 2 it was called now, but there's a new curriculum that's changed slightly. So we've moved away from that foundation phase Key Stage 2 to a progression step curriculum, which links very closely to the secondary education system. So without the primary education, the building blocks aren't put in place then for that subject-specific learning that's more in place in the secondary phase.
How would you describe the current state of primary education in UK?
In the UK whole, I think pedagogy has changed a huge amount, the way teachers teach. So I think there's some very good practice taking place. I think there's big differences in the UK between England, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, and Northern Ireland. So it's hard to say how the UK is, because there's even massive differences between Wales and England. In Wales, there's been a huge change of a curriculum that has a very different focuses on 4 key purposes of what do we want children to look like as they go through their education system. Whereas in England, they're very stepping stones, a skill-based curriculum, knowledge-based curriculum, rather than the sort of focus on core purposes.
How do you become a primary education teacher, right?
Okay.
The first thing I want to know that what qualifications are required to become a primary school teacher in the UK?
In the UK, you need qualified teacher status. So that's the key. There are a number of different routes into that. At the university here, we provide 2 of those routes. One is a 3-year undergraduate degree that focuses on teaching across all primary areas. The other option that we have here is that if you have a undergraduate degree, then we do a 1-year PGCE, postgraduate certificate in education, with QTS. So both routes, one's a 3-year route, one's a 4-year route. So they're the 2 routes that we provide. There are other routes in Wales. With Open University, they do a 2-year sort of on-the-job training programme. But you still have to have the graduate, you still have to have a degree in order to do that. But we don't provide that here at USW.
Right. What does the application process for teaching training programs typically involve?
Basically, they go through the normal UCAS system, so through the applying to university, the same as any other degree. So that would be the normal process. They need to have enough credits from their qualifications. Generally, that's 3 A-levels, BBC at a minimum. They also need to have English, Maths and Science, grade C or above at GCSE. So that's the minimum requirement to get onto the degree. But we also have an interview process. So a lot of degrees don't necessarily have interviews, they just look at qualifications. We don't do that. We look at the qualifications. If they go through that phase, then we invite them to interview. So the interview process then has questions around their understanding of teaching and what teaching looks like. We ask them to talk about how they would deliver a lesson or what approaches they would do. And there's a group task as well, where they interact with others talking about the new curriculum in Wales. That's our sort of key focus. After that, then, that's where the sort of process of choosing our candidates then that we feel are right for teaching.
How important is practical experience during teacher training, and how it is typically structured?
Performance is one of the main key features of the training. Every student has to have at least 120 days classroom practice throughout their course. The undergraduate, that's spread over 3 years. So in year 1, they look at the younger age groups. sort of 0 to 7-year-olds. And in that age group, they do at least 8 weeks in school spread over the year. So the way we've structured it at USW is they have time in university looking at pedagogy, looking at approaches to teaching, looking at subject content. They go into school then and practice and develop that content alongside a classroom teacher. They might do that for 2 weeks. They're back in university, and it's that process of in university, in school throughout year 1. Year 2, they look at the upper age phase, so that 7 to 11-year-old phase. So they've got a good grounding in both phases. And again, that's a staggered approach. They do 2 4-week blocks with a school-based mentor. And then in the final year, there's a number of different approaches. We have a research project in school, which is school-based research, like a dissertation, but it's focused on learners in the classroom. And then they do an 8-week continuous block in that year. So that's the 3-year undergraduate process. The 1-year PGCE, so once they've got their degree, they do the PGCE. That process, still 120 days, but the course starts much earlier in the year. So it starts beginning of September and doesn't finish till the end of end of June. So they then are, again, in university for a short period, in school, back to university, and that's staggered throughout the year. So they'll do 4 long blocks of teaching with university in between throughout the year.
What opportunities are there for ongoing professional development for primary school teachers?
There's a number of different opportunities. The first would normally be as part of a newly qualified teacher, you have additional time out of the classroom to have professional development. That's for the first year that you get the majority of that time, but there is often opportunity in the second year of teaching to have time out of the classroom. So that's a standardised process. Every school has access to the local authority. So each local authority in the country has teachers that are specialists that can give support. We also have regional consortia. That regional consortia offer CPD training, etc. So I think there's a number of different opportunities. From the university, we offer some professional development to schools. So I run a number of different sessions looking at physical literacy, looking at health and well-being. So schools will invite me in, I'll run training after school or when they have training days. So that gives teachers additional, and that would be the same with other areas of learning in the primary education system. Lots of different opportunities.
You said that about you have a 3 years, nearly 4 years process. Do you have any count? How many students you are?
The government set a number of teachers they want to train within a year. I can only speak for Welsh Government. I think it would be the same in England and Northern Ireland and Scotland. They set ratios, and then the universities bid to Welsh Government to say, this is what we can provide, and they tell us then how many students we can accept. So it's normally between 60 and 80 per year in the University of South Wales for the undergraduate, and I think it's normally between 20 and 40 for the postgraduate. That changes on a year-by-year basis. I'm assuming Welsh Government do some analysis of how many school places are needed, how many teachers are retiring, and then looking to fill those gaps. They will do that because some students train in Wales and go and work around the world. You know, we have links to a number of international schools, so some students go to work in those when they qualify. And some students don't feel like teaching is for them after they've done the degree, even though they may be qualified. So there's a variety of different sort of ways that Welsh Government create that. This year we've been given set numbers that we need to recruit. We always slightly over-recruit, 10% or so, because you have a natural drop-off over a 3-year or over the PGCE period.
How is technology being integrated into the classroom, and what impact is it having on student learning?
Yeah, I mean, we used to do a huge amount on digital. We had an Apple specialist working alongside us, who actually still, even though they've left the university as a lecturer, still comes in to give additional support and training. So most lecturers now, because the curriculum has digital across the curriculum, most lectures have some form of technology to be used in that, linked to the digital literacy framework that Welsh Government have put in as a statutory process. So lectures should include some form of digital in some way, shape or form. That increases learning of our students, but also hopefully that would have a knock-on impact when they're delivering in schools, that children will pick up and develop and use that as part of their everyday learning. The impact it's having, I mean, there's pros and cons to technology. I think without going into all the research, I'd say that overstimulation of children means that then lessons have to have that high stimulation levels in order to engage children, because they're so overly stimulated by not necessarily learning digital, but digital access at home, so gaming, social media, etc. So yeah, that has an impact on our teachers that have to be able to engage those students in a digital world, whilst ensuring that learning is taking place. Again, with the digital competency framework, there's some real set guidelines about the types of learning children need in order to use digital effectively, for their sort of for across any subject really. It's a sort of a competency needed in order to be successful in a digital world.
What are the most effective teaching methods being used in primary school today?
In our curriculum, we have 12 pedagogical principles. So some really key principles of learning. That might include things like, I'm just trying to think of one, that like assessment for learning might be a pedagogical principle that is used in teaching, where you're ensuring that children are engaged in their learning, that they're able to assess what they're doing as they're doing it, in order to and with their peers, in order to try and help their learning move forwards. Whereas instead of the assessment of learning, where it's exams, marking, etc., there's a sort of step away from that they're learning and reassessing what they're doing as they're doing it, in order to be self-sufficient in their learning. So that's just one example of some of the things they're doing.
Do you have any exam process? It's hard, or how does it goes on?
In Wales, we've moved away from standardised the SATs, which we used to have in primary. There are still national testing, but I think there's a move away from testing. The new curriculum's trying to focus on learning and pedagogy rather than testing students. I think pupils, it's sort of been found that children are spending so much time testing that actually the teaching was being lost, and teachers were teaching to the test. Whereas actually what you want children to do is learn a wide range of skills in order to be adaptable and changeable to whatever comes their way. We're trying to train children for a job market that might not even be there yet. So rather than testing for skills that might not be needed, we're looking at a holistic approach to learning. However, they still look at numeracy and literacy testing. There is some of that still taking place, but it's not yet known how the new curriculum will affect numeracy and literacy going forwards.
What are the subjects they have to learn in primary school?
Again, there's 6 areas of learning and experience in Wales, so they've moved away from subjects. However, if you look at those areas of learning experience, the one I oversee is health and wellbeing. So you probably, within health and wellbeing, you'd have physical education, you'll have personal and social education, maybe some knowledge and understanding of the world. So that sort of context. Humanities is another area I teach. So again, you've got your history, your geography, your religious education, but instead of teaching those as discrete subjects, you're looking at, well, actually, is there commonality between those subjects, and what do children need to learn in order to to meet all the requirements of those areas of learning. And that's even going to have a knock-on effect later on with GCSEs and A-levels, which are the sort of secondary qualifications. So that may change as time goes on. They're looking at changing those areas.
Because of I asking about your exam process in Sri Lanka, we have on grade 5 students,
Yeah.
they have to face a scholarship exam. Because of that, our teachers' parents pressure them from grade 3. So it's a bit hard for them. It's like a beneficial exam for in rural areas, student can reach the urban area school.
We have a comprehensive system in Wales where schools have catchments. So you have a secondary school, sort of age 11 to 16 or 11 to 18, depending on the school. And they have a cluster of schools around them, feeder schools, I would call them, that all those children, no matter of ability, will have a place in that secondary. The only way you would have a different system is if a parent wanted to pay for their education. Mm-hmm. So there are privately run schools where parents will pay for a child to attend. They may then require them to be of a certain standard in order to attend, but that's generally not the case. And again, with the standardised system, the comprehensive will accept all children of all abilities, no matter what, but they're generally within that cluster of schools. And that's geographical, so it's to do with where they live.
How have recent government policies impact primary education? Recent.
I think if you're looking at policy change, I suppose the biggest policy change is the curriculum. That's had a massive impact because before it was a very prescribed curriculum with it was sort of focused on a set of skills and a way of delivering those skills, sort of expectations, almost like a curriculum that has been designed by the government. In Wales now, they haven't got a curriculum that's designed by the government. They're saying there's key areas of learning that need to take place and key focus, but actually the curriculum that the school delivers is designed by them. Now that's had a massive impact because every school will be designing their own curriculum in a different way. Mm-hmm. So there may be, and I'm speculating on this one because it's very early days. It only started September just gone. What we might see is different children coming out with different skills and different attributes and different knowledge bases. Whereas before, if they were following a set pattern, a set curriculum, they were, a child in one school could move to a different area and they probably would have had very similar experiences. I don't think that would be the case now. So that's the biggest policy change in primary education probably since 2008. But even then, that was just a revised curriculum. This one's a completely different system.
Do you follow any other countries' education system?
I think we always look around the world for different systems. Obviously, sort of places like Denmark, Netherlands, that sort of area have a very sort of different system to how we had it in the UK, and yet they still get very good results. So I think we look to some of those areas. Scotland had a curriculum change. Graham Donaldson sort of was involved in that big curriculum change, and he was also involved in the curriculum change in Wales. So we do look to Scotland. But I think there was mistakes made in Scotland that we can learn from in Wales. So we're hoping not to repeat some of those areas. But it's probably too early to tell what differences that's made.
Can you give me an example that what are the things you expect, the skills and the methods of teaching, and what are the things you do?
On teacher training, we do lots of practical based areas. So it might be around, I'll use physical literacy as an example, health and well-being. So instead of saying, right, we're going to play a game of cricket today, that would be maybe a traditional method in PE. We will look at, okay, what skills are needed to be physically competent. So you might be thinking throwing and catching is a skill we need to learn. So, but instead of playing the game cricket will get children to look at, okay, we're going to practice throwing and catching. What does that look like? What does good look like? And how can we create and develop a game that includes throwing and catching? So I'll do that with my students. So I'll give them lots of equipment, lots of opportunities, break the skill down, and allow them then to practice, refine, but use that assessment for learning strategy of them looking at each other and picking the key skills that they needed to develop. So that gives very different from, right, we're going to just play a game of cricket. We're looking at what are the underpinning skills that children might need. And that goes throughout all the sort of key skills, physical skills that I use. So that would be quite different to how it was taught in the past. Again, humanities is an area. So I might look at humanities in a way that what are some of the key geographical sort of things that we need to look at. So ecology, we might look at, well, where has rainforest deforestation? If I want them to learn about that, how can we learn about it? So I might create a murder mystery and look at Chica Mendes as an example, a rubber tapper who was murdered, and might look at that and say, okay, well, we've got to solve a murder. So they're solving the murder case, but actually it's about deforestation. Why was deforestation happening? Who was benefiting from it? Who was losing out from it? But whilst they're doing that, they're looking at investigation skills. They're looking at increasing knowledge and understanding, empathy, all of those sort of skills that are geographical, humanities type based skills, but in a practical situation. And even to the point where they're reporting back to other groups to say why they believe this person may have done it and some of the logistics behind it. So you're taking children away from it. Instead of me telling you this person got murdered because of this, this and this, they go and create a system of them leading their own learning, I suppose.
Do you start to sex education in primary schools?
Yeah, sex education is part of PSE. It is there, and it comes within the health and wellbeing area of learning experience. And there's lots of discussion about relationships, what are good relationships, bad relationships, the science behind sex education as well. There is some discussion about where that comes within the primary curriculum, and they're still debating in Wales about where that sits, and also what parental consent should be required, because there are some parents who feel that that's something they should be having a discussion with their children or not. But at the moment, it is part of the curriculum.
Can you give me a small example that how do you start to give sex education to primary school?
It wouldn't be called sex education within the curriculum. It'd be about healthy relationships. It comes under healthy relationships, but also some science is the biology behind it. So an example of healthy relationships, we might do a lesson on, what different families look like. So I would find a book that has a multiple of different types of families. There's a variety of books out there that are aimed at primary age children that would talk about family lives and partnerships, so that they would see different partners, they would see relationships from different faiths and religions, different skin colours, and of different sexualities as well within that. So that would then maybe open up questions. Now, some of those questions may be inappropriate to answer at certain ages, so that's an opportunity to say to a parent, these questions have come out, we haven't discussed them with your child, but it's an opportunity for you to talk about it. If you want us to talk about it, we can. But it's about raising a little bit of awareness and an understanding over, you drip feed, I suppose, is the best way of putting it, over a period of time.
How important is parental involvement in a child's education, and what strategies can school use to increase parental engagement?
Parental engagement is massively important, and you can see that in the children that you work with in schools. So those children have huge parental engagement in their learning, and you see those children improve at a quicker pace. So that might be simple things like reading to your child at bedtime. It might be, playing games with children that increase conversational skills, but also understanding of rules. It might be the fact that there's numeracy, sort of with scorekeeping and things like that. So that parental engagement from an early age will have an impact on where that child starts their learning in school. We're seeing that, as much as it shouldn't be, but in the more affluent areas, you often have higher parental engagement, so children will have lots of skills before they even come to school. And in the poor areas where parents don't engage with their children as much, you often see children coming with lesser skills. So we know parental engagement is really important. There are lots of strategies in the country, not just school-based, but you have Flying Start, which is trying to bridge the gap in those poor areas to ensure that parents have opportunities. From a school perspective, they're constantly trying to engage parents in the children's learning. That might be through interaction through sort of specific web-based links. So parents can see the children's work, they can engage in their work, and they can do work at home to support and help. So that's one way. Again, homework, as much as that has some negative connotations, homework at home that engages parents in the child's learning is really important. There are lots of strategies depending on the school. One strategy I used, we had an activity club after school where we invited parents to come in and work with their children on a project. So it was a physical project, so they were doing physical games, but actually the main aim of the game was about reading. So trying to get parents engaged in the children's reading. So the project was a sort of 6 to 8 week project. Parents came in, but slowly we were giving the children had books that they were using in the games and activities they were playing, and then they were being taken home. A lot of those parents didn't have any books at home. We didn't realise that. So then we were looking at donations and finding books that sort of parents could take home. So that not only engaged parents in the children's learning, but actually the children then had repetition from school and at home, so you're doubling the impact.
Can you highlight some of the recent success or improvements in the primary education sector?
Obviously, I only work at the University of South Wales, so I can only look at that. I think some of the key improvements are the relationships with our schools. We work in absolute partnership now with our primary colleagues, our primary schools. So instead of just sending our students out to school for 2 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever the time may be, and then bringing them back in, actually we have a very close link with the schools. So the schools know exactly what we're teaching here and then try to replicate some of that. We have 4 key themes. That for each block we have synergy days, so they're days where the students all meet together in one of our cluster schools. They all learn in the same thing. The university lecturer is also there for that day, as well as the mentors. We do lots of mentor training, so we bring our primary school teachers into the university to have days of training with them about the different approaches that we're using here. So we're really sure that when our students go out to those schools, the mentor or the teacher that they're working with has a really good understanding of what that student needs to develop. We also have a set of standards in Wales that teachers need to meet. By the end of the degree, I can't remember, there's 47-ish standards that those students need to meet in order to get qualified teacher status. So we're constantly looking at those standards, saying, well, how are you going to achieve that? What are you going to have to demonstrate? And so we're constantly working with the primary schools in order to do that.
What advice would you give to someone considering a career as a primary school teacher?
I always say to my students when they apply that it's a really hard job. It's a difficult job, but it's very rewarding. So they need to understand that it isn't a 9 till 3:30 job and they get 13 weeks of wonderful holiday every year. Actually, within that job, there's a lot of hard work and it goes on well beyond the normal school day. And even into the holidays, they'll be working. So I always start with that. But I always talk about going into schools beforehand. So we ask our students to do 20 days in a school, a primary school, before they come to us, not necessarily teaching or anything like that, because they wouldn't be in that position, but to understand how a primary school works, to understand the roles and responsibilities of that teacher, and about the way that they engage with children. Because I think that 20 days it gives you a real feel of what a primary school is like to work in. So that's the main bit of advice I give, really.